I gave my son my savings, my trust, and even my retirement security because I believed I was helping him build a better future. Then one day, after everything I had sacrificed, my phone lit up with a message that shattered my heart. We're better off without you. What I discovered afterward was even worse than betrayal. Hidden accounts, painful secrets, and a truth that would force me to choose between protecting my son and saving myself forever. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're tuning in from. We love seeing how our stories connect people from all around the world. Your comments and thoughts bring this community to life, and we're so grateful to have you on this journey with us. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, grab a cozy seat, maybe a cup of coffee or tea, and prepare yourself for a tale that will captivate your heart from beginning to end. Let's begin. My name is Margaret Holloway, and at 67 years old, I had reached a stage of life where silence had become my most constant companion. Every morning, I sat on the front porch of my small home in Savannah, Georgia, with a cup of coffee warming my hands while the sun slowly climbed above the oak trees lining our quiet street. The neighborhood had not changed much in the last 30 years. The same neighbors walked their dogs. The same mailman drove his rote. The same church bells echoed through the distance every Sunday morning. What had changed was my life. 6 years earlier, I had lost my husband, Thomas Holloway, the man who had shared nearly 4 decades of my life. Since then, the house had felt larger than it really was. Some days, the room seemed almost too quiet, as if the walls themselves were waiting for a voice that would never return. Thomas had built much of this house with his own hands. Every hallway carried a memory. Every room held a piece of our family history. In the living room, I could still picture our son Ethan taking his first steps across the hardwood floor. The dining room reminded me of crowded Thanksgiving dinners filled with laughter. Even the backyard carried memories of birthday parties, family cookouts, and long summer evenings when life seemed wonderfully simple. I had never found the courage to change much after Thomas passed away. His workshop remained exactly as he had left it. The tools still hung neatly on the wall. The scent of cedar and varnish still lingered faintly in the air. Sometimes I sat inside that workshop just to feel close to him again. Before retirement, Thomas and I had spent decades building a small furniture and handcrafted interior business. We were never wealthy, but we were comfortable. We worked hard, saved carefully, and believed that every dollar represented effort, sacrifice, and responsibility. More than anything, we wanted to give Ethan opportunities we never had. Thomas adored our son, but he also worried about him. He often believed Ethan expected life to arrive more easily than it should. I used to dismiss those concerns. A mother sees her child differently. Even after Ethan became an adult, I still saw flashes of the sweet boy who used to run through this house with scraped knees and impossible dreams. After Thomas died, Ethan became the center of my world. Helping him gave me purpose. Whenever he needed something, I was there. When college expenses became overwhelming, I helped. When wedding costs grew larger than expected, I helped. When business setbacks appeared, I helped again. Each sacrifice felt natural because I convinced myself that supporting family was simply what mothers did. Then Ethan married Vanessa. The first time I met her, I noticed how polished she seemed. Everything about her appeared carefully planned. She spoke confidently about success, luxury, and future achievements. There was always another goal, another milestone, another version of a bigger life waiting ahead. Something about her made me uneasy. Not enough to object, not enough to question Ethan's happiness, so I ignored the feeling. Over the years, Ethan and Vanessa built an image of success that looked perfect from the outside. Their social media pages displayed beautiful vacations, elegant restaurants, and smiling photographs, that made me proud every time I saw them. I truly believed they were building the life they deserved. That belief remained intact until one quiet morning when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and saw Ethan's name. We had not spoken in several weeks. The excitement in his voice surprised me immediately. He told me he wanted to discuss an extraordinary opportunity, something that could change everything for the future. As I listened, a smile spread across my face. For the first time in years, I thought perhaps my son was finally calling to share good news, rather than ask for help. I had no idea that conversation would become the first step toward the greatest heartbreak of my life. After that phone call, I spent the next several days wondering what Ethan was so excited about. It was strange how a mother could still feel anticipation over a simple conversation with her child, even when that child was nearly 40 years old. Every time my phone buzzed, I found myself smiling. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to believe that perhaps life was moving into a happier chapter. My imagination wandered in countless directions. Maybe Ethan had received a promotion. Maybe he and Vanessa were finally thinking about starting a family. Maybe all the hard work they had put into their careers was beginning to pay off. By the time the weekend arrived, I had built an entire future inside my mind. When Ethan and Vanessa pulled into my driveway that Saturday afternoon, they seemed more cheerful than I had seen them in years. Vanessa stepped out of the car, carrying a bakery box from my favorite local shop. Ethan wrapped me in a warm hug that lingered longer than usual. The attention felt wonderful. As we sat around my dining room table, they spoke with an energy that immediately captured my attention. Ethan spread several folders across the polished wood surface while Vanessa opened a laptop and organized a presentation that looked surprisingly professional. What followed felt less like a family visit and more like a business proposal. Ethan explained that he wanted to launch a luxury tourism company on Hilton Head Island in South Carolina. The business would focus on exclusive coastal experiences, private boat excursions, personalized vacation packages, and premium services aimed at wealthy travelers seeking something unique. The idea sounded ambitious. The more he talked, the more impressed I became. He had market research, projected revenue charts, and development plans stretching years into the future. For a moment, I felt the same pride I had experienced when he graduated from college. My son sounded confident, successful, capable. Then Vanessa introduced what she called the centerpiece of the vision, a waterfront mansion. According to her, the property would serve multiple purposes. It would be their family home, a place to host high-end clients, and a symbol of the brand they hoped to build. As photographs appeared on the screen, I found myself staring at a stunning coastal estate overlooking the water. The house was magnificent. Large windows reflected the ocean. Elegant balconies faced the shoreline. Palm trees framed the entrance. Vanessa described the property with visible excitement. She spoke about family gatherings, holiday celebrations, and future generations enjoying the home long after all of us were gone. The word family appeared repeatedly throughout her description. Then she shifted toward a subject she knew would reach directly into my heart: future grandchildren. She painted vivid pictures of children running across the lawn, searching for seashells on the beach, and spending summers surrounded by relatives. As she spoke, I found myself imagining Thomas standing beside me, smiling at grandchildren we had never been given the chance to meet. For a brief moment, a memory surfaced. Thomas had always believed that important financial decisions deserved patience. He often warned against rushing into opportunities simply because they sounded exciting. The thought lingered only briefly. Ethan explained that financing had become complicated. The banks wanted additional guarantees and stronger financial backing before approving everything. Without immediate support, the opportunity could disappear. I looked at my son and saw hope in his eyes. I saw dreams. I saw a future he desperately wanted to build. Before the afternoon ended, I agreed to help. A portion of my retirement savings would provide the support they needed to move forward. Relief immediately spread across Ethan's Maizies. Vanessa appeared emotional, although something caught my attention in that moment. Whenever she spoke, her excitement always seemed strongest when discussing the mansion itself rather than the business. The observation created a faint discomfort I could not fully explain. Still, I ignored it. A few days later, I sat inside a bank office signing the first set of financial documents. As my pen touched the paper, I felt hopeful. I believed I was helping build a future for my family. I did not realize I was signing the first page of a disaster that would eventually cost me far more than money. The first few weeks after signing the documents felt exciting. For the first time in years, I felt as though I was participating in something larger than my quiet life in Savannah. Ethan called regularly with updates about the tourism company. Construction crews were preparing parts of the waterfront property, marketing plans were being finalized, and reservations were already generating interest online. Every conversation left me feeling proud. I told friends at church about Ethan's project. I showed them photographs he sent of Hilton Head Island and spoke about his ambition with the same pride that mothers carry when discussing their children's accomplishments. Then the first unexpected problem appeared. According to Ethan, the dock attached to the waterfront property needed significant upgrades before clients could safely use it. The cost had not been included in the original estimates. Without the improvements, several planned business packages could not move forward. The amount seemed manageable. Temporary, a simple obstacle that successful businesses often faced. I transferred the money without hesitation. Helping felt natural. After all, I had already committed to supporting the project. Over the following months, the company began building an impressive online presence. Vanessa seemed particularly talented at attracting attention. Every week brought new photographs, polished advertisements, and glowing descriptions of the lifestyle they were creating. The mansion appeared constantly. Its waterfront views, elegant architecture, and luxurious interiors became central pieces of their marketing strategy. Looking at those images, I felt proud to know that I had contributed to making it possible. Then another financial emergency arrived. This time the issue involved furnishings. According to Ethan, high-end clients expected a certain standard of luxury. The furniture originally planned for the property was no longer sufficient. Additional upgrades would help attract wealthier customers and generate stronger profits. The explanation sounded reasonable. Once again, I agreed. Another transfer left my account. Soon after that came landscaping expenses, then promotional events, then insurance adjustments, then unexpected operational costs. Every request arrived wrapped inside a promise that the investment would eventually pay for itself. I believed every word. As the months passed, I began making quiet adjustments to my own life. I postponed repairs on my house. The aging roof could wait another season. The old air conditioning system could survive one more summer. I stopped replacing things that wore out. I spent less on myself and convinced myself that everything was temporary. Once the business succeeded, Ethan would repay me. At least that was what I kept telling myself. Several months into the project, I visited Hilton Head Island. I wanted to see firsthand what all those transfers had helped build. The mansion was undeniably beautiful. The business seemed promising. Yet something during that visit unsettled me. Vanessa spent most of the afternoon discussing wealthy neighbors, exclusive communities, luxury vehicles, and social events attended by influential people. She seemed fascinated by status and appearances. The business often felt secondary. The mansion seemed to hold her true attention. I noticed it. I simply chose not to dwell on it. Back in Savannah, the requests continued. Each solved problem seemed to create two new ones. Every payment was followed by another urgent need. The pattern was becoming difficult to ignore. Some nights, I sat alone in Thomas's workshop, staring at the tools he had left behind. I could almost hear his voice reminding me that helping someone and enabling someone were not always the same thing. The thought troubled me. Still, I pushed it away. Ethan was my son. Mothers believed in their children even when logic suggested caution. By the end of the summer, thousands more dollars had disappeared from my accounts. Friends commented that I looked tired. I smiled and assured them everything was fine. Then one evening, Ethan called again. This request was different, larger, more urgent. As he explained the amount they suddenly needed, I felt my stomach tighten for the first time. For the first time since this journey began, I wondered whether I had stepped into something far bigger than I understood. The amount Ethan requested that evening was larger than anything that had come before. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the figures he had sent while the late afternoon sunlight stretched across the floor. According to him, a major expansion opportunity had suddenly appeared. If they acted quickly, the business could secure partnerships that would dramatically increase future revenue. If they missed the opportunity, they risked falling behind competitors already entering the luxury tourism market. The explanation sounded urgent. It also sounded frighteningly expensive. For the first time since this journey had begun, I hesitated. I remember staring out the window toward the garden Thomas had once cared for so lovingly. Something deep inside me whispered that I should slow down and think carefully before making another commitment. But then I thought about Ethan. I thought about everything he had already invested emotionally into the project. I thought about the future he was trying to build. And once again, I chose him. Within days, I withdrew a substantial portion of my retirement savings. Signing those papers felt different from previous transactions. Earlier contributions had come from extra savings or available funds. This time, I was touching money that represented my future security. I reassured myself repeatedly that this would be the last major contribution. Success was close. The business only needed one final push. At least that was what I wanted to believe. As months passed, subtle changes began creeping into my daily life. I delayed replacing aging appliances. I postponed routine maintenance around the house. A dental appointment I had planned for months quietly disappeared from my calendar. The membership fees for several community activities seemed harder to justify. Without realizing it, my world gradually became smaller. Meanwhile, Ethan's world seemed to become larger every week. Our conversations changed as well. Calls that once included discussions about family, memories, or ordinary life became increasingly focused on finances, schedules, investors, and business growth. Sometimes entire conversations passed without him asking how I was doing. I noticed. I simply told myself he was busy. Successful businesses required sacrifice. A few weeks later, I made another trip to Hilton Head Island. The transformation was remarkable. The mansion looked nearly complete. Luxury vehicles occupied the driveway. Landscaping crews worked throughout the property. Expensive outdoor furniture overlooked the water. Everything appeared beautiful. Everything also appeared costly. As Vanessa guided me through the house, she seemed captivated by every symbol of status surrounding her. She spoke enthusiastically about exclusive social clubs, influential homeowners, invitation-only events, and the importance of maintaining a luxury image. The business itself barely entered the conversation. The mansion remained her favorite subject. Driving back to Savannah that evening, I felt an unfamiliar heaviness. For the first time, I remembered one of Thomas's old lessons with painful clarity. He used to say that helping someone stand was very different from carrying them forever. The thought stayed with me for days. More requests arrived. More invoices appeared. More money disappeared from my accounts. One evening, I opened my banking records and carefully reviewed every transfer I had made since the project began. The total frightened me. I sat in silence for nearly an hour staring at the numbers. A few days later, a bank envelope arrived in my mailbox. At first, I assumed it was another routine document connected to the various financial commitments I had already made. But as I reviewed the paperwork, something immediately felt wrong. The company name listed on the document meant nothing to me. I had never seen it before, yet the address connected to the account belonged to my property in Savannah. A cold sensation spread through my chest. Then I noticed references connected to Ethan and Vanessa. For the first time since this entire venture began, I wondered whether there were secrets hidden beneath everything I had sacrificed to support. I sat at my kitchen table long after the sun had disappeared behind the trees, staring at the unfamiliar company name printed across the bank document. At first, I assumed there had been some kind of mistake. The address listed on the paperwork belonged to my property in Savannah. That alone was strange enough. But what troubled me even more were the repeated references to Ethan and Vanessa. Their names appeared throughout the documents, connected to accounts and business activities I had never heard about before. A knot formed in my stomach. The next morning, I called the bank. The representative could not share every detail, but she confirmed enough to deepen my concern. The company had been registered several months earlier. It was somehow connected to Ethan's tourism operation. Business credit lines had been opened, financing requests had been submitted, and my home address appeared throughout the records. I thanked her and ended the call. Then I sat in silence. Months earlier, Ethan had promised complete transparency. He had assured me that we were building something together as a family. Yet here was an entire business entity that existed without my knowledge. I began organizing every document I could find. Bank statements, transfer confirmations, loan paperwork, receipts. The stack grew alarmingly high. Later that afternoon, I called Ethan. I expected a simple explanation. Instead, I encountered a version of my son I barely recognized. He sounded distracted and impatient. Before I could fully explain my concerns, he dismissed them as routine business matters. According to him, everything was normal, everything was under control, and there was nothing for me to worry about. The conversation ended quickly. I stared at my phone afterward, feeling strangely embarrassed, as though I had interrupted something more important than myself. That evening, unable to quiet my thoughts, I opened social media. Vanessa's account was filled with photographs from the life they were building. Luxury dinners overlooking the water, private events, designer clothing, smiling faces surrounded by wealth and comfort. Every image seemed carefully crafted to display success. As I scrolled through the photographs, I thought about everything I had sacrificed over the previous months. The retirement funds, the postponed repairs, the medical appointments I had delayed, the quiet compromises I made without complaint because I believed I was helping my family. For a long time, I sat in the darkness of my living room, trying to understand why I felt so distant from the very future I had helped finance. Then my phone vibrated. I assumed it was another business update. Instead, I saw a message from Ethan. My heart immediately lifted. For a brief moment, I believed he might be apologizing for the earlier conversation. I opened the text. The words were short, brutally short. "We're better off without you." Below that was another sentence. "Please stop interfering in our life." I froze. The room seemed to disappear around me. I read the message again, and again, and again. Each time the words felt more impossible. Images flooded my mind without warning. Ethan learning to ride a bicycle. Ethan opening Christmas presents beside the tree. Ethan standing beside me at his father's funeral. None of those memories matched the message glowing on my screen. As the shock settled into something colder, I discovered another wound. I had been removed from family group conversations. Vanessa's social media pages were no longer accessible. Even recent family plans had taken place without my knowledge. The exclusion had not happened by accident. It had been deliberate. Late that night, I gathered every document connected to Ethan's business and placed them neatly on my dining room table. For the first time, grief began giving way to clarity. And before going to bed, I made a decision. The next morning, I would call Daniel Brooks. I needed the truth, no matter how painful it turned out to be. I barely slept after receiving Ethan's message. The words remained burned into my mind long after midnight. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw them again. We're better off without you. By sunrise, the tears had stopped. What remained was something colder. Questions. I made coffee, gathered every document I had collected, and called Daniel Brooks. Daniel had been part of our lives for decades. He was more than an attorney. He had been one of Thomas's closest friends, a man who attended family celebrations, graduations, and holidays long before he ever handled legal matters for us. When he heard my voice, he immediately sensed something was wrong. A few hours later, I sat across from him in his office. The stack of paperwork I carried filled nearly half of his conference table. Bank records, transfer confirmations, business documents, financial statements, evidence of years of trust and sacrifice. Daniel spent nearly an hour reviewing everything without interruption. The deeper he went, the more serious his expression became. Watching him study the paperwork forced me to confront something I had been avoiding for months. The amount of money I had contributed was staggering. What had once felt like individual acts of support now looked like a continuous stream of financial dependence. For the first time, I truly saw how much of my future security had been transferred into Ethan's dreams. Then Daniel turned his attention to the mysterious company. Within a short period, he confirmed what I had feared. The business entity was directly connected to Ethan's tourism operation. It had been established months earlier. My home address in Savannah appeared throughout multiple filings. Most importantly, nobody had ever informed me that it existed. I felt another piece of trust break inside me. But worse news was still coming. As Daniel continued reviewing electronic records connected to the company, he discovered several documents carrying my electronic signature. At least they appeared to carry my signature. I stared at the pages in confusion. I had never seen those documents before. I had never signed them. I had never authorized them. The realization struck like a physical blow. Daniel carefully explained what he suspected. Someone had used my identity to complete financial filings without my knowledge. The situation was no longer limited to family disagreements or poor communication. Potential fraud had entered the picture. My hands trembled as he explained the risks. Additional debts could eventually become linked to my name. My credit reputation could suffer serious damage. Future liabilities might reach me if the situation continued unchecked. The danger extended far beyond the money I had already lost. For several minutes, I could barely speak. I thought about my retirement savings, the years of sacrifice, the excuses I had made, the trust I had given so freely. The grief that had consumed me after Ethan's message slowly transformed into anger. Not explosive anger. Something deeper. A painful understanding that this may not have been an accident. Daniel eventually presented me with two choices. I could ignore everything and hope the problems resolve themselves. Or I could begin protecting myself immediately. The second option carried consequences. Investigations could follow. Financial institutions would be notified. Ethan's business could suffer severe damage. For a moment, I closed my eyes and thought about Thomas. I remembered countless conversations about responsibility, boundaries, and self-respect. When I opened my eyes again, the decision felt clear. For years, I had chosen everyone except myself. This time would be different. I instructed Daniel to move forward. No more blind sacrifice. No more rescue missions. No more excuses. As he began preparing formal notices and legal documentation, I felt emotionally exhausted. But beneath the exhaustion was something new: strength. For the first time since this nightmare began, I was no longer waiting for answers. I was finally fighting back. The consequences of my decision arrived faster than I expected. Only a few days after Daniel submitted the documentation challenging the disputed filings, financial institutions began responding. Requests for verification were issued. Certain business activities were temporarily paused. Reviews were launched into accounts connected to the tourism company and its related entities. Daniel kept me informed without overwhelming me. Each update carried the same message. The situation was growing more serious. There was no turning back. Part of me felt relieved. Another part felt terrified. For months, I had ignored warning signs because I wanted to believe the best about Ethan. Now the truth was forcing its way into the open, and I could not stop it even if I wanted to. Then the phone calls started. At first, there were only a few. Then there were dozens. My phone lit up throughout the day with missed calls from Ethan. Text messages followed. The confident businessman who once spoke as though success was guaranteed suddenly sounded uncertain and anxious. His messages asked for explanations, then demanded explanations, then pleaded for conversations. The shift was impossible to ignore. Soon Vanessa joined him. Her messages arrived at all hours. Some sounded confused, others were angry. A few blamed me for creating problems that threatened everything they had worked for. By the end of the week, desperation had replaced outrage. For the first time since this ordeal began, I saw fear behind their confidence. What they needed from me now was something money could not provide. Meanwhile, trouble continued spreading through their business. Questions from lenders created delays. Expansion plans stalled. Investors who had once seemed eager began requesting additional information. The polished image they had worked so hard to create was beginning to crack. The cracks widened every day. Despite the pressure, I held my ground. Daniel advised me to limit direct communication, and I followed his guidance. I refused to argue through text messages or emotional phone calls. Whenever necessary, I directed questions through legal channels. The boundaries felt unnatural. For years, my instinct had always been to fix problems. Now, I was choosing not to rescue someone. That choice hurt more than I expected. One afternoon, Ethan appeared at my front door without warning. The moment I saw him, my heart broke. He looked exhausted. Dark circles framed his eyes. His posture carried a weight I had never seen before. For a brief moment, I saw not the businessman from Hilton Head Island, but the frightened little boy I had spent my life protecting. He tried explaining the situation. According to him, misunderstandings had grown out of control. The filings were not as serious as they appeared. Everything could still be resolved if everyone simply remained calm. I listened quietly, but something inside me had changed. For the first time, vague explanations were no longer enough. After he left, I sat alone in the living room and cried. The legal actions did not erase decades of love. They did not erase birthdays, holidays, scraped knees, graduations, or family memories. I was grieving more than money. I was grieving the relationship I thought we had. Later that evening, Daniel called with another update. Additional irregularities had been discovered. The investigation was expanding. The pressure on Ethan and Vanessa was increasing rapidly. Then came one final surprise. Vanessa requested a private meeting. Unlike her previous messages, this one carried no anger, only desperation. Daniel urged caution. I agreed to meet her anyway. Something told me she was finally ready to reveal the truth. And deep down, I knew that truth might change everything. Agreeing to meet Vanessa was not easy. Part of me wanted to refuse. Another part needed answers that had remained hidden for far too long. After speaking with Daniel, I arranged the meeting at a quiet cafe halfway between Savannah and Hilton Head Island. When Vanessa arrived, I barely recognized her. The polished confidence that had always surrounded her was gone. Her hair was hastily pulled back, dark circles framed her eyes, and the exhaustion on her face could not be hidden behind makeup or expensive clothing. For the first time since I had known her, she looked vulnerable. We sat across from each other in uncomfortable silence. Eventually, she began speaking. The business, she admitted, was in serious trouble. Investors were becoming nervous. Financial reviews were creating delays. Expansion plans had stalled. The image of effortless success they had worked so hard to create was beginning to collapse. As she spoke, I realized she was no longer trying to impress me. She was simply trying to survive. Then the conversation turned towards something deeper. Vanessa spoke about her obsession with success. Growing up, she had always feared failure. She wanted security, admiration, and the kind of life she believed wealthy people enjoyed. Over time, that desire grew stronger than common sense. The mansion became more than a home. It became a symbol, a way to prove she had achieved the life she dreamed about. And once that obsession took hold, every decision became focused on protecting the image rather than the reality. What came next hurt even more. Vanessa admitted that she had encouraged Ethan to keep asking me for money. She knew I would continue helping because I loved my son. The conversations about family legacy, future grandchildren, and shared dreams had not been entirely genuine. They were carefully chosen because they appealed to my emotions. Many of the suspicions I had been struggling with were true. For months, I had been manipulated. Yet something surprised me. Vanessa was not making excuses. She was not blaming Ethan. She was not blaming circumstances. She accepted responsibility for her choices. Greed had influenced her decisions. Pride had blinded her judgment. And now she was facing consequences she could no longer control. After the meeting ended, I drove home feeling emotionally drained. Later that evening, Daniel called. His voice carried a different tone than usual. He had discovered new information while reviewing old estate records belonging to Thomas. Years before his death, Thomas had established something called a family protection trust. I listened in stunned silence as Daniel explained its purpose. The trust had been designed to protect me if signs of financial exploitation ever appeared. Under certain conditions, significant assets would automatically become shielded from individuals attempting to benefit from abuse or manipulation. Those conditions now appeared to have been triggered. The realization left me speechless. Even after all these years, Thomas had been protecting me. Suddenly, many of his old warnings made sense. He had seen risks I never noticed. For the first time in months, I felt something other than grief. I felt gratitude. Vanessa left that meeting uncertain about her future. Ethan remained trapped in a growing financial crisis. The business continued unraveling. But as I sat alone that night, I realized something important. For the first time in years, my future no longer depended on saving someone else. It finally belonged to me. If you're still watching and wondering whether regret can ever undo betrayal, comment 8 below. The confessions have been made, the secrets are out, and now it is time to see who must live with the final consequences. Now let's move on to the conclusion of the story. Several weeks passed after my meeting with Vanessa. During that time, I focused on rebuilding parts of my life that I had neglected for far too long. I spent more time in my garden, reconnected with old friends, and slowly rediscovered routines that had nothing to do with financial emergencies or business crises. For the first time in years, peace began returning to my days. Meanwhile, Ethan and Vanessa's world continued falling apart. The investigations did not simply disappear. Investors who once seemed eager to support the tourism company withdrew their backing. Financial institutions became increasingly cautious. Expansion projects were canceled, business opportunities vanished, and revenue began declining faster than anyone had expected. The image of effortless success that had dominated their lives started collapsing. Then came the mansion. The waterfront estate that had once represented ambition, status, and endless possibility became a financial burden they could no longer sustain. Mortgage obligations piled up. Legal complications multiplied. Creditors became more aggressive. The dream that had consumed so much of their attention slowly slipped away. Eventually, the property entered forced sale proceedings. The mansion was gone. Everything they had sacrificed relationships to obtain disappeared in a matter of months. Luxury vehicles were sold. Expensive memberships ended. Public appearances became rare. Soon afterward, Ethan and Vanessa moved into a modest rental apartment far removed from the image they had worked so hard to create. The collapse was complete. A few weeks later, Ethan contacted me. This time, there was no urgency in his voice, no demands, no requests for help. Only a simple question asking if we could meet. I agreed. When I saw him, I barely recognized the man standing before me. The confidence that once filled every room had vanished. He looked older, tired, and emotionally exhausted. Yet for the first time in years, he also looked honest. We sat together quietly. There were no prepared explanations, no attempts to shift responsibility, no effort to defend his choices. Instead, Ethan finally acknowledged the truth. He admitted that greed and pride had influenced many of his decisions. He spoke about becoming obsessed with success and convincing himself that every compromise was temporary. He admitted that the message he sent had been cruel and unforgivable. The words, "We're better off without you," still haunted him. As I listened, I realized something important. My son was finally facing himself, not the version he showed the world, the real version, the flawed version, the responsible version. When he finished speaking, I told him something I had spent months learning myself. Love and accountability can exist together. I would always be his mother. Nothing could change that. But the old cycle was over. I would not rescue him financially. I would not erase the consequences of his choices. The life he built and the mistakes he made belonged to him. For the first time, he accepted that reality without argument. When our meeting ended, Ethan stood and quietly thanked me. Then he walked away. I watched him leave with a mixture of sadness and peace. Justice had arrived. Consequences had been faced. And for the first time in a very long time, healing finally felt possible. Several months later, life felt different. The chaos, the investigations, and the heartbreak no longer controlled my days. The wounds had not completely disappeared, but they no longer defined me. I began focusing on myself again. The house that once felt painfully empty slowly became a place of comfort. I repaired things I had neglected during the years of financial stress. I reconnected with friends, attended community events, and spent more time doing the things that once brought me joy. Most importantly, I returned to Thomas's workshop. For years, I had avoided spending much time there because the memories felt too heavy. Now, I found peace among his tools and unfinished projects. Restoring old pieces of furniture reminded me of the life we built together and the values we shared. Financially, things became stable again. The Family Protection Trust continued protecting the assets Thomas had carefully set aside. Over time, I realized the trust was never truly about money. It was about dignity. It was about independence. It was about making sure I would never have to sacrifice my future to earn someone else's love. Ethan occasionally called. Our conversations were respectful and simple. There were no requests for money, no manipulation, and no pressure. Trust would take time to rebuild, but at least we were starting from a healthier place. I also learned something important about forgiveness. Forgiveness does not erase pain. It does not remove consequences. It does not require forgetting what happened. Sometimes forgiveness simply means refusing to let the anger control the rest of your life. Looking back, I finally understood my greatest mistake. I confused love with endless sacrifice. I believed helping someone meant protecting them from every consequence. Now I understood the difference between helping and enabling. As the sun rose over Savannah one quiet morning, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee in my hands, just as I had done countless times before. The difference was that I was no longer waiting for someone else's future to begin. I was living my own. And if my story has taught me anything, it is this: family should never require self-destruction. Love should never demand the loss of dignity. And sometimes the strongest act of love is learning where to draw the line. Sometimes life teaches its most important lessons through disappointment, loss, and difficult truths. We often believe that love means giving endlessly, but true wisdom comes from understanding that love without boundaries can become self-sacrifice. Respect, trust, and gratitude are the foundations of every meaningful relationship, and when those foundations disappear, no amount of money or devotion can replace them. The strongest people are not always the ones who endure the most pain. Often, they are the ones who learn when to stand up for themselves, protect their peace, and move forward with dignity. Every ending carries a lesson, and every lesson creates the opportunity for a new beginning. Thank you for spending your time with this story. If it touched your heart or reminded you of someone you know, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Do not forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more meaningful stories.